It is indeed my privilege to have the opportunity to address you today about my journey of leadership, which was not one of choice, but rather one of circumstances. The story starts in 1936. My parents, they met in kindergarten. My mother was the daughter of the fire chief. My father, at the age of 6, was already chasing fire trucks. I think he saw an in with my mom. They dated through high school, got married when they were 19. My mother put my father through college. He graduated magna cum laude, top of his engineering class from Iowa University. My mother thought he was a pretty bright guy until he came home and told her he was moving the family 800 miles to New York. And oh, by the way, I took the lowest paying job offer out of 13. You see, he was following his passion. He went to work for a fire truck manufacturer. One of the other things he did was when he was in New York was he joined a volunteer fire department, which had been a lifelong goal of his. Unfortunately, the job did not work out. It was not as he had expected. And he found himself a year and a half later picking up the family and moving to Gary, Indiana, to work for U.S. Steel. Now, you see, Gary, Indiana, has a paid fire department. There's no place for volunteers. So what would a person frustrated with wanting to be a volunteer fireman do? What would any of us do? Well, we would start our own fire department, which is exactly what he did. In the city of Gary, he started his own volunteer fire department. And from the age of 6, I would travel with my dad incessantly to the fire station. We first built the fire station. I was with him every weekend. He taught me mechanics. He taught me physics. We had conversations in the car about every subject you can imagine. To say that the sun rose and set with my father would be an understatement. Unfortunately, he did teach me one thing, however, unwittingly, that was not good. And that was leading, especially leading volunteers, is difficult work with very few rewards. You see, when you're leading volunteers, you're trying to not only get your vision to be their vision, they have to give up family, career, and other interests to support that vision. As I grew up, I saw my father constantly struggle with people not showing up for work details, not meeting expectations, and I learned that this was nothing that I wanted any part of. In 1968, on a napkin at lunch, he developed a fire nozzle, an automatic fire nozzle. You've all held a garden hose, you've all put your thumb on it. And when you put your thumb on that garden hose, you're changing the pressure and the flow to do the job at the moment. My father invented a nozzle that did that exact same thing for a fireman automatically. He was very excited about this concept. He went to the 5 manufacturers in the United States trying to get one of them to buy the concept. They all said it was a crazy idea. Until 1 year later, one of those companies came back and said, we'll give you $750 for the rights to be signed over. At the time, he felt he had no options, and so he took the money. A couple years later, he actually came up with a better way of doing it. And one day, he announced to the family that we were going to go into business making fire nozzles. I can tell you, we thought he was crazy. Does the world really need another fire nozzle manufacturer? Can there really be enough fire nozzles needed by anybody to have another company, much less one in our basement? But he was not to be deterred. And so my mother, as she always did, supported him. We started in the basement. I worked my way through Purdue-Calumet, graduating in 1977 with an engineering degree. My father quit U.S. Steel the same year, and together we set off to become titans of the fire nozzle industry from the basement of our house. Regrettably, in 1982, my father and I were fighting a fire together in Union Township, Indiana, and I had the first opportunity of my volunteer firefighting career to make a rescue. It was my own father. Another firefighter and I dragged my father out of the basement when he had collapsed. We took him to this fire truck. He sat on the running board, and the first thing he did was light up a cigarette. The next day, he took a stress test, and he failed. And 2 days later, he went in for an angiogram that went wrong. I raced back from Chicago, got to him just as he was being taken from surgery to ICU, and his final words to me were, "Take care, Chief. I'm counting on you." And he died the next morning. September 11th became a day of remembrance for me long before the rest of the country. This started a period in my life that was absolutely described as maniacal. My physical size does not help when I also apply brute force to my leadership. I pushed people. I demanded of people. I was the poorest example of a leader that you could imagine. I worked 16-hour days. By golly, I was going to make this company go. I was angry with my family when they didn't have pity for the things I was working so hard at for them. One day, in 1986, we had built a new factory, and I had cleverly placed this big picture window in my office so that I could look out on the factory floor and make sure everybody was working. Another example of great leadership. I was in on Saturday. It was one of my 16-hour days. I looked through that window, and out in the plant, it was dark, it was quiet, and a wave of realization came over me that I couldn't take this company any farther with the leadership that I was showing. I sat there for over a half an hour, and I cried. A few weeks later, our banker put me in touch with a group of CEOs in Indianapolis. I went to my very first meeting. We were all explaining what demons we were fighting, and one of the members of the group quickly said, "I know just the guy that can help you out, but you're going to have to travel. He's in Valparaiso." "Valparaiso? I'm from Valparaiso. I know right where that's at." Well, he said, "You must have seen the place then. It's called the Center for Life Change." Center for Life Change? I'm not going to the menopause clinic. I said, No. But it was one of those circumstances that you know you're absolutely right until the instant you discover that you are wrong. So I went to see Al. Al was a huge man. We started our therapy together, and one day he made an unusual request. He said, "Stewart, the next time you come, I'd like you to bring something personal of your father's." I dismissed the request until the day I was leaving for the appointment, and I ran out of the office, and I spotted my father's helmet on the shelf at the front desk. What thing more represented how I idolized my father and his leadership than his helmet? So I grabbed it, and I ran out the door. The instant that I walked into Al's office, he gave me one of those looks that you have all seen, that look of, "Oh, buddy, I've got you now." I didn't know what he was going to do. So he told me to place the helmet on a chair and to sit opposite. And he said, "Stewart, I want you to tell your father what you feel he expects of you." Oh, the words came easily. It was, "Be perfect. Don't screw up this opportunity I've given you. Take care of your mother. Work hard. Work hard." And then Al said, "Oh, that's good. Now sit in the chair and put the helmet on. And I want you to tell your son, Clyde, what you expect of him." The words were very different. They were, "I love you. Take care of your mother. Do the best you can. Enjoy your life. No matter what you do, I'll always be proud of you. And most importantly, take care, Chief. I'm counting on you. They were words that changed my life. And I wonder how many of you are making decisions in your life based on something that you heard and interpreted that maybe should be thought about again. I went forth from that day committed to becoming a better leader. And one of the first things that Alan taught me about was a concept that he called positive intent. You see, people don't go to work each day consciously planning to screw up. They don't do stupid things because they're stupid. They do stupid things because they think it was the right thing to do. And what Alan taught me was that if you can take enough time to honor the positive intent, the discussion about how to help them make a better decision next time becomes far more effective and far more simpler for all involved. One of those days of positive intent, we were having a meeting in our conference room and I was sitting on the side. We had the traditional corporate 14-foot long table with seats all around with the power positions at the end. I was sitting on the side. Our next meeting started and people started to flow in. The chairs filled up, all except for my seat at the end. One of our sales guys named Paul came in, took one look at the chair, and disappeared out the door like a rabbit. Paul, what the heck are you doing? What's wrong with you? He came back a few minutes later with a chair. I said, what's wrong with that chair, Paul? Oh, no way, boss. I'm not sitting in the power seat. No way. How simple of a concept that we all deal with every day. Do we really need to have our title on our name badge to be a leader? Or does leadership come from the things we do and the trust we build, and are we frequently hiding behind that title instead? The following week, that table disappeared, and we put a round table in there. Because you see, over 1,000 years ago, King Arthur had it right. Everybody in King Arthur's round table knew he was the king. Everyone knew that King Arthur had the final say. He didn't have to be at the end of the table to make his statement. And he wanted his knights to be around him in a circle where they could each contribute equally to the decisions being made. I can tell you from personal experience that having a round table in your business and having a round table in your home can completely change the dynamics of your family and of your business. Speaking of picking a seat, a few years back I was invited to speak at Valparaiso University. My topic was engineering in a global environment. I prepared hard for the speech. I was ready. I walked into this massive auditorium, 300 seats, and the first 12 rows were empty. I went a little off script. I can admit I was a little angry. How many of you seniors think that you're going to be leaders in the companies you join after graduation? A few hands went up, a dozen or so. I said, I'm going to pause here, folks. I'd like you leaders to move down. No one moved. Not one. Now I was really angry. And I decided that all the work was not worth it, but teaching them a lesson was. And so I promptly said, this speech was designed for leaders, and since there are none present today, I am finished. And I walked out. The professor went a little bit crazy on me. What am I going to do with these kids for an hour? My advice is to leave them sitting right there. I think they maybe learned the best lesson of their life today. And finally, I'd like to share with you a ritual that I've developed over the years. When I go to bed at night, I think back through the events of the day. I can pretty much always come up with an interaction that I had with someone somewhere that I'm not as proud of as I could be. I make a note, and the following day, I seek that person out. First, I apologize to them for not being the leader I want to be. And secondly, I ask their permission to let me try again. Leadership is like any sport. You go out every day and you hope to get a little bit better each day, but you know you will never be perfect. But during that play, you get those few successes that give you the energy to come back and try again and again and again to perfect your leadership. And by giving people a view into you that you are being apologetic and realizing that you are failing as a leader gives them the permission to fail to the people that they lead. It's all about getting better. Nothing big gets done without people working together. And the catalyst, the glue that holds people together is leadership. If you want to influence the world, start by influencing the people you work with every day. Thank you.